Hi everyone! Today we are going to chat a little bit about the books that I read during the months of March and April. First of all, sorry if you hear music or voices in the background. It's really strange to be in quarantine situation with a lot of people in the house. We are safe, we are healthy, and we hope you are also as well in good health. As I said before, I'm going to giving you an overview of the books that I read during the months of March and April. Let's start. Oh, if you don't know me, my name is Clara and I'm the owner of this channel, The Ink Path, where I talk about books in English and in Spanish. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's start with this, shall we? Okay, before we start, I must tell you that during these months I read a total of 10 books, which is an insane amount of books considering what I normally read, which are 2 or 3 tops monthly. The thing is that with the coronavirus and the quarantine, March it was more of an adjusting month for me, and that meant that I actually read a ton during that month because it was the only thing that actually helped me through this madness, because I was asked from my workplace to work from home and I have to take everything with me to work from home, even though it's something I actually do at least twice a week on a normal basis. But it was quite hard, and we all had to adjust in the household, and I used reading even more as a coping mechanism that I normally do. So I read a lot of books and I want to chat with you about them. I read books, I watched plays, and I also read short stories, which is not very common on this channel. The first of the books that I actually finished is a borrowed audiobook from the British Library that I'm a member of, which is Poems to Fall in Love With by Chris Riddell. I know Chris Riddell because of his drawings. He actually helped picturing the book by Neil Gaiman called Art Matters, and I know that he also collaborated in illustrating, if I'm not mistaken, Neverwhere, the illustrated edition also by Neil Gaiman. In this collection of poems, love in all its various forms, since, well, from kind of passionate love to family kind of love to despair for not being loved or for losing love, is discussed. This is a collection of books from several authors, including again Neil Gaiman, Nikita Gill, also I think it is in there, I believe, other kind of maybe Percy Bysshe Shelley or Lord Byron is also in there. Several poets and writers actually try to approach love from the poetry kind of perspective, and I really like it. I find a very light, lovely book. I also feel like if I had the original kind of written book with the illustrations by Chris Riddell, I believe I would have loved it more, in the same sense that it happened with Art Matters. I believe his drawings also always, and it doesn't matter which book he's illustrating, I believe Chris Riddell's drawings give them like an extra kind of value to the book. But I enjoy it, and then I continue my reading for a creative project that I'm working on with a book called Mitología griega y romana, dioses, héroes, semidioses y monstruos de Alessandra Bartolotti. This book by Alessandra Bartolotti is a manual about Greek mythology and myths and goddesses and gods, and how these creatures intertwined with one another and the relationship that they have. After reading about kind of Greek mythology, I wanted to actually read more poetry, and I decided to pick up also The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. Now, I know Rupi Kaur is very famous and she is rightfully known, but I never had the opportunity to read Milk and Honey, and even though it's translated in Spanish, so I could actually grab a physical copy in Spanish without the issue of the language, I prefer to wait until the second volume of her poetry was out, because at that time I actually started to kind of reading her poems in Instagram and knowing her a little bit more. She was also working, or she was already working on this book, The Sun and Her Flowers. And as soon as I knew the topic of this poem collection, which was the figure of women and how we heal and how we love and how we understand ourselves and our partners and our heritage, and also how we overcome certain issues, I preferred to read this first before going into the most known work of hers, and I love it. I finished this this poem collection. I finished it on the International Women's Day, which was incredible, and I loved the fact that I actually finished on that day, and I find it really emotional to me, because I am not having a great time in my life at the moment, and I'm trying to understand myself. But the good thing about this poemary is that I felt I was being seen by someone that actually didn't know me at all. Having said that, I enjoy this poemary, as I said, and I will talk to you more about it when I actually have time to review it. After that one, I read, and I'm going to check the list. I had a list of books here on the computer, that's why I'm not looking directly to the camera so much. After reading The Sun and Her Flowers, I saw a production in Spanish of King Lear by William Shakespeare. I love William Shakespeare work, but I find King Lear very hard to understand. You have to know that all the works of Shakespeare that I own are actually in English, so I'm trying really hard to read the plays. I'm saying read because here in Spain it's not uncommon to see a play by William Shakespeare on a stage, but it's not as common as it can be in the English countries. So the majority of the plays that I have read are actually on paper format. So I've seen live a couple of plays before, a comedy and a historical play, and this one I wanted to read or to see King Lear because I find it very, very interesting in the sense that it deals with power, with aging, and with the human condition as center, as a kind of core elements in the play alongside other topics. And I have tried to read the original play 3 times on paper, but because of the quarantine situation that we are going through, the National Play and Stage library here in Spain decided to not allowed because it was allowed before, but to be more open and be more vocal about the products that they have. And in this library they have scripts and videotapes and video recordings of of other productions, and I wanted to try King Lear because I had issues, as I said before, reading the play on paper, and I found very hard and play, but because it was heart wrenching, and I understand why I had so many issues reading it, but watching it live, even though it was an old production, I kind of understood fully the play in different ways I haven't, in a more complete way than only reading the script itself. So I count watching King Lear while checking on the proper script, and then I listen to the audiobook that saved my first month at home, which was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. She also knows this, so I'm not going to be very vocal about it. I will explain a little bit more on the proper review, because this book will have a review. This is a 5-star book for me. This is a book about a man called Zachary Ezra Rowland, yeah, that actually he finds a book while he's doing his PhD research in the university, and he finds a weird old, very old book that happened to have in its pages a passage of an event that happened when Zachary was very small. An event that happened to Zachary when he was very small. And he's a little bit kind of taken aback because he doesn't understand how a book that is so old may contain something very personal about him. And these kind of quest, this kind of intrigue, set him on a quest to find what is that book and where does that book come from. This leads him to kind of a secret library called the Harbor, that is part of the Starless Sea, and that's all I'm going to say. This is a very intriguing, very whimsical, very almost magical realism type of book that is a love letter to books and to reading and to readers. I was very amused and confused by this book several times, but it happened to be also the book that I went to for comfort, that I went to when I actually needed to escape, and that's why I love it so. The next book I read was actually Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by J.K. Rowling. Now, I decided to listen to this on audiobook because my library, my British library, had the kind of dramatized edition where A.B. Ramain, who plays Newt Scamander, the writer of this kind of guide study book about magical creatures in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them movies, actually dramatized the book, and I love his work and I wanted to give it a try. Now, I actually reread this story in this format because I have it in Spanish in my Harry Potter collection's bookshelf. This, as I said, was a reread, and this meant that I also knew how it was going to go. I love this story because it's very dear to my heart, because when it first came out in the edition that I own physically, you have these kind of side notes that they are supposed to be from Harry, Ron and Hermione. So for me, lacking that was a little bit of a letdown, not because the book is bad. I love this book in this kind of audiobook dramatized edition because it has all these effects talking about all these creatures. So you, for example, you have this werewolf and you have the howling of the werewolf, and it's quite creepy and keeps you in the atmosphere of the magical beast. But I also felt like now, with distance, with the perspective of time, this is an interesting book because it's a guide, but it's still a study kind of book, so you don't have a plot. And even though I like it, I also feel like I would enjoy the original Harry Potter saga, for example, more. But it was a great book. I love the effects, I love the dramatization, so it was an interesting book to read. After that, I decided to read in Spanish again, in Kindle edition this time, and I read Sanil by Sofia Saurin, which is a short story about a girl who travels to a new region of the country, and it's a rural region, so she lives near a forest, and one night she sees this kind of whimsical lights and follows them and enters into the world of the world of fairy. And I like how the world was created. I like the idea behind it, and I also like there's a lot of, or I think there's a hint of LGBTQ plus representation, which is always good. However, I also have this issue with short stories that when I get used to the style and I want more of the story, it ends. I think it was a first impression of short story, and I like the experience, but I would love to be longer than it is. So that's my last book of the month of March. In April, I read a total of 3 books, which are Una Flor de Fuego by Sonia Lerones. This is also a short story in Spanish that kind of it's very inspired by the imperial Japanese historical time period, and it tells the story of 2 warriors in this empire, and how they have to deal with being there's treason within the ranks within the army that they are part of, and they also have to deal with their feelings about it and their feelings for each other, because again, this is an LGBTQ plus representation short story, and I adore it because the style is very, very neat and beautiful, and it's very, very crafted to fit in the time period that is set. And I know the author, even though I haven't finished any of her novels before, but I feel it's a lovely way of getting to know the author for her work. It's a good piece of work. And after that, I managed to listen to A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes, which is a retelling of the Iliad by Homer, but taking into account only the perspective of all the women that were involved in the war. And I love that because I've read the original text, and the original text is mainly told by the gods or the warriors or the male characters within the story. The very, very small parts that were given to women are either as kind of malevolent goddesses or the cause of the war. I'm talking here about Ellen, who actually is blamed for the events. The idea of guilt and blame is also explored here, but from the point of view of the women. And I love this story. I love it because it's giving you the whole perspective that Homer decided to omit. But I also love it because it took me to meet other characters that either not mentioned in the original text or they're briefly spoken of, like the wife and the youngest daughter of Agamemnon. And also I love Cassandra, which is briefly known in the original text. Cassandra is one of my favorites. I love the power of Calliope, who is the muse that is dedicated to poetry and to kind of lyrical prose. And I don't know, I fall in love with the style. I love it, and I will tell you more about it with the proper review that I want to do about this book. After that, my last book in April that I read was also reading and watching the show while reading it was Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Thanks to the quarantine, the Globe decided to open the theatre digitally for all of us who are staying at home, and they decided to put into YouTube, in the YouTube channel, for a limited period of time. They decided to upload productions of the previous years of several plays by the bard. So they, I think they started with Hamlet, or at least it was the first one that I actually saw. And even though I love the story, I read this play a couple of times. This third one I actually read it. I found the production a little bit disconcerting, because I like it and I like the changes that they did, but in parts of the story I found that they were being too comical, when in my mind these bits that I'm talking about were more tragical than comical, really. But other than that, it was great to see a stage production in the Globe, which I visited as a tourist, but I actually never went to for like seeing a play, and I love the experience. These are all the books that I read during these past 2 months. Can you tell me which ones did you read? Which are your favorites and why? Let me know in the comment section down below. See you next week. Okay, bye.